Anderson, and I'm very glad that you have joined us for today's webinar. I am an advocate at Pacer Center, and with me is another advocate at Pacer, Jill O'Gorman. And the two of us will be presenting this and taking your questions as you give them to us. We will as Jonathan explained, there's a little box that you can type your questions in. We will try to take as many questions as we can that relate directly to today's topic, how will I know my child is making progress. If you don't get your question answered today, please feel free to call Pacer with that question at 952-838-9000. Please also note that this webinar will be archived on Pacer's website in a short time from now. So if there's something you want to refer back to or you want to tell somebody else about it, this webinar will be available for future use. So let's move on. I'm really excited about this today's topic because this is really a key concept to special education that sometimes gets overlooked. But as this slide in front of you says, this is very integral to all of special education because the Individuals with Disability Education Act, or IDEA, says these two things, that students receiving special ed have a right to not only be involved in and make progress in the general curriculum, but also make meaningful progress on their special education goals. These things really show that we do have heightened expectations for children with disabilities, and we parents often are the ones to lead the way in that. We should expect progress. We're the ones who dream and hope and see potential where others may not. That's our role as parents. We believe in the capability of our children. We need to be patient and view our children's future with anticipation and optimism. And, you know, it's always true that children often live up to our expectations, so we certainly want to make them high. And what we do for them today has lifelong implications and benefits. I'm, of course, a parent of children with disabilities, and I'm very glad that I had very high expectations for my children with disabilities and that I did closely watch their progress, because special education is just not worthwhile if children aren't making meaningful progress. So what we'd like to do in today's webinar is explore some of the ways, like the title says, ways that you can know whether your child is making progress or not. Children all go to school to learn, but how do we know if they're actually making progress? Well, in this webinar, we're going to explore some different ways through special education, regular education, and other information from outside of the school. One thing that we often remind parents of at Pacer is that special education should be data-driven, not just people's opinion, but the actual data. And so most of the things that we're going to be looking at today will be using the data that you can find through special education, regular education, and other sources. There will be some observations and other things as well, but try to always remember that primary in our looking at progress, we should be looking at data. So what are some of the special education sources? IDEA guidelines requires actually schools to track the educational progress of children with disabilities, and there's several ways to do that. So first I'd like to talk about evaluation. Of course, the initial evaluation is required to qualify for special education services. This can happen at various ages, sometimes when children are very small or sometimes when they're quite a bit older. And this evaluation shows needs, and as far as our topic today, can kind of provide a baseline for measuring progress. This is where your child was at when the child was first evaluated for special education. And then, once a child is qualified and has an IEP, the team must reevaluate at least once every 3 years. That can happen more frequently if there's a particular need and the team decides that it's necessary. But at a maximum, it's every 3 years. Now, parents, of course, get copies of the evaluation summary report, both for the initial evaluation and then again for every reevaluation. Now, here's the first way I'm going to talk about for looking at progress. I want to note that it wouldn't be a one-to-one correspondence. So if your child took a particular test and the results are in the initial evaluation and then 3 years later they took a similar test, that may not be a one-to-one correspondence as to what progress was made. But it would give you an indication whether your child is improving in whatever that skill or aptitude was. And another thing that it might tell you is initially, or 3 years ago, whenever the last evaluation was done, how did your child compare with their age or grade mate peers? And how do they compare with those peers now? If 3 years ago they were 2 years behind their peers in reading, now are they still 2 years behind their peers in reading, or has it jumped to 3, or has it gone to 1 year? Those are the kinds of things that you can tell, or that might give you some information from comparing evaluation reports. And of course, you can also compare the child to themselves. What was their reading level 3 years ago? What is it now? What is their fine motor skills then? What are their fine motor skills now? So comparing evaluations is one way to give an indication of whether your child is making progress or not. A second one here is outcomes of the annual IEP goals. I want to expand on that a little bit. When an IEP is written, if you look at the IEP form, above the goals is something called the present level of educational performance, or the present level of academic and functional performance, as it says on most of the newer IEPs. This is a really important section because this gives the baseline for this year. Where is this child at now? And you really don't know if a child's made progress if you don't know where they're at now. And so it's really important for the team to spend some time to get a really concrete and well-defined specific picture of where the child is at now, because it's from this present level of performance that the measurable goals are written. And so each goal should name a skill or behavior that needs to change, and it should report the child's current level. Now, this might be written in the actual goal statement, or you might find it at the top of the page in the present level statement, but somewhere it should be very apparent that for whatever this skill or behavior that we want to change, we should know exactly where they're at now when this IEP starts. So you've got the skill, you've got the where the child is at now, and then the goal will state what the ending level, what can we reasonably expect this child to achieve in 1 year time. IEPs are written for 1 year. So this will be the skill or behavior that is going to go from X level to Y level. And then finally, how will that progress be measured? So again, I just want to repeat that because this is so important, that every goal should name the skill or behavior that needs to change, give the current level of skill or behavior, state what the child can reasonably attain in 1 year, and tell how that progress will be measured. Then we get to progress reports, and these are just extremely important. If you'll notice on the, if you take a look at your child's IEP, it's usually on the first page. It will say how the progress reports, a little box there. And in that box, it should talk about how often and by what method the child's progress on the IEP will be reported to you, the parents. So take a look at that and see what it says. The frequency, how often, is the same as children at whatever school they go to get report cards. So for example, if your child goes to Pineview Elementary and they get 4 report cards a year, then your child should get 4 report cards and 4 IEP progress reports. These are separate documents. And then also take a look at how the school is going to report to you those 4 times or whatever it is for whatever school your child goes to. It could be a phone call. They often say that one of the times will be the annual IEP meeting where you find out, like the ending level of progress and the child's current level of where they stand now in performance. So, that annual IEP meeting can be one. It could be a written report, could be a phone call, but just realize that that isn't a given, that this is a place where parents and school can work together to determine what it would be the most appropriate way for the parents to understand what progress their child is making. So on those progress reports, many school districts have a form where they say whether the child is making adequate progress on their goal or not. Be sure that you keep the copies, so if you get these written reports, or you take notes if it's a phone call, as to where your child stands on each goal, because the question you kind of want to ask here is, at this rate of progress, will my child achieve this goal by the end of the IEP year? Because if the answer is no, then you don't need, the whole purpose of this is that you don't need to spend a whole year doing something that isn't working. You can go back to the IEP team and look at something else if it's not working. Typically on many school district forms that I've seen, there's some check boxes, and typically the box that's checked is adequate progress. So take a look at that. Take a look at if it's a percentage. At this rate of progress, is that percentage increasing in such a way that you think by the end of the IEP year the child will achieve this goal? So I guess my point is, don't simply look and see which box is checked there, adequate. Actually take a look at what is reported in the progress report. It's only required that school districts report on the annual goals, but many schools also report on the individual objectives. And so whichever one is measurable, or sometimes both, but whatever is measurable, that's what you want to get the information on, so that you know whether at this rate of progress the child will be able to achieve this goal at the end of the IEP year. Then at the annual review, I always like to recommend that one of the very first things you do when you go to your annual meeting is to get the ending level of last year's goals. That's a great place to start. That's kind of the floor to build on. You will also have lots of other information, report cards, if any new evaluation was done. There might be a lot of different things that go into that. But one of the things you want to look at is the ending level of last year's goals to see if they did make the level of progress that was predicted by last year's IEP team. Because if something is different, then you might want your team to be looking at something different. And I'll be going more into that in a little bit. You can, as a simpler thing, you can, once you get a new draft of a new proposed IEP, you might want to take a look at last year's present level of performance statements and this year's present level statements, and see as a snapshot whether you think your child has been making progress. So those are a couple of ways you can check on the progress on goals and objectives. But there are also regular education sources, because remember on the first slide we talked about that the Individuals with Disability Education Act says that children not only have a right to make progress on their goals and objectives, but they also have a right to make progress in the general curriculum as much as is appropriate for an individual child. So how can you, what are some tips for looking at regular education? Of course, you can look at the daily work that your child does. Are they, bringing things home? Are they able to get their homework done? Are they taking notes? Is their homework even written down in a way that you can understand it? You can ask the teacher how the daily work compares to other kids in the classroom. Then, of course, you can look at your child's test scores, and this could be, like how are they doing on their math quizzes, all those kinds of things. If your child is in a mainstream classroom, Are there any modifications? Are there any adaptations to take into consideration when you look at these scores? Those are important things to know. Then, of course, the report cards. Does the report card show academic progress, or does it show any situations where they're having trouble with, let's say, math or something like that, or is it all their academics or none of their academics and more of, like Phi-Ed or something? But take a really close look at those report cards, because I think a lot of times parents overlook the fact that the children with disabilities who are in special education have a right to make progress in the general curriculum as well as in their IEP. And there certainly can be some overlap.
I have a question that might be appropriate, given the fact that you're just talking about the right to make progress in the general curriculum. A parent here that says their child has received many Fs in their mainstream math class. How would you address this?
Thanks, Jill. That's a great question, and that's one that I hear from parents too. You get a report, parents get a report card, and time or two it might show an F or a D in a particular subject. So my question, I always like to ask questions. My question would be, does that grade show that this child is making progress in the general curriculum? And in most cases, I would have to say no. If that child is getting that grade, then that is not a passing grade. And if you're not getting a passing grade, then you're certainly not making progress in the general curriculum. So this would be an indication that the parent and the IEP team would probably want to talk to find out what's going on in that math class. Sometimes more evaluation is necessary. Sometimes it's just an observation. Sometimes it's talking to the teacher. Sometimes it's looking at, well, where is this F or D coming from? Is it the tests? Is it the daily work? What is it? Because basically, when we go back to what IDEA says, it's that children have a right to make progress in the general curriculum, and Fs and Ds don't usually indicate that progress is being made. So that's a real important thing for parents to be aware of and for IEP teams to discuss. Parent-teacher conferences are also important. Just talking with the child's regular education teacher can help you understand how the child is performing in the classroom. As you know, regular ed teachers are very important parts of the IEP team, and here is a really important place where they can be involved in knowing whether your child is making meaningful educational progress in the general curriculum or not. Then, of course, there's all the statewide and district-wide tests and assessments. For district examples, many districts use NWEA or the MAP test. Some use Iowa Basic Skills or California Achievement Tests. These tests compare academic achievement across age or grade level. And it's really important when we're looking at how our children are doing is to not just measure them against themselves, but also compare with their age or grade level peers. When our kids with disabilities grow up, they're not going to be just competing against themselves for employment, housing, whatever it is, but we need to have these high expectations that our children are going to compare well with their age and grade level and their adult peers as well. So it's important to look at our child's individual progress, but also compare them and see how they're doing with their grade or age level peers. Often these tests, these same district tests, are given from year to year, so that can also be a measurement of progress. And then statewide as well, as part of No Child Left Behind, children with disabilities have the right to be included when schools are evaluated annually to ensure that all students are making academic progress. Now, these are tests that really are accountability tests for the school district. But parents do get reports about how well the child is doing and how well the child's school is doing in educating certain groups of children, including those with disabilities. And that information is always available on the Minnesota Department of Education website. Now, these statewide assessments are given in grades 3 through 8 and grades 10 and 11. and students participate in the tests with or without accommodations. The IEP team discuss both the state and the district-wide tests and decides how a particular child will participate, and this includes any accommodations. Now, one thing I do want to say, unfortunately I've got these acronyms on there. The MCA is the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment. The MTAS is the Minnesota Test of Academic Standards. The MCAs are the tests that are given to most students. The MTAS are tests that are given to students with the most severe cognitive delays. And the last on there is the GRAD, and those are the graduation required assessments, which do overlap with the MCAs. So that's what those acronyms stand for. I will say that very recently, currently, a new evaluation that we'll soon be able to add to this list is the MCA-M, and this is for modified. So you can watch for that, maybe even ask your IEP team about a new statewide assessment that will be coming soon. And at PACER, we're going to be developing extensive materials on this as well, so that there will be another regular education way that children with disabilities can be, and others. The new test is not just for children with disabilities, but maybe a little bit more accurate for some children, way of gauging their current performance. Then there's also ways to find information outside of the school to kind of try to help answer the question of whether your child is making progress or not. School isn't the only source. There can be less formal observations in the home and in the community. You can observe your child in the home and kind of track whether your child is generalizing skills that are taught at school. And by generalizing, let me give a couple examples. You know, if your child's speech is understandable, or if your child's speech is an area of a goal on the IEP, let's say for articulation, clear speech, and the goal is that the child will be understood, let's say 50% of the time, what's your observation at home or in the community? If the school is saying they're understandable, their articulation is good 50% of the time, does that also hold true at home or in the community or in a restaurant? What do the relatives say? Can they understand the child? That's what I mean by a generalized skill. Can they do at home or in the community what they do at school? And sometimes the answer is no, sometimes the answer is yes. This can also be a good way to help build goals and know whether a goal should continue or not if the child can do whatever the skill or behavior is, not just at school, but out in the community. Because progress can't be just in the school. We need progress in life as a whole. So we want to look at what's happening to the child in the home and the community as well. The second bullet on there, outside evaluations. Sometimes parents take children to be evaluated at Mayo Clinic, the University of Minnesota, Learning Disability Association, various other places. And you can take a look at some of those results and compare, to school results or what you see your child doing to also try to help you understand whether your child is making meaningful educational progress or not. Another thing to consider, and sometimes that we might forget, but it's very, very important to involve your child in his or her progress. It's their life. My children with disabilities have grown up, and they're the ones who are living with the results. So it's really important that we involve our children as young as possible. One of the handouts that we have linked for you on this particular presentation is how can my child be involved in the IEP process, and we really encourage you to take a look at that. And just at home too, discuss, does your child understand his or her strengths and his or her educational needs? Do they understand their IEP? Do they know what their goals are and why they're working on what they're working on? And do they understand what he or she needs in order to learn? It could be really important to have this conversation with your child, particularly if you see, well, I was going to say particularly if you see there's a problem, but I think that even if there isn't a problem, it's just really important that you involve the child in the process and ask them about their learning environment. Are things working for them there? Is there anything that could be changed so that they might be able to learn better? Is there something that's particularly difficult for them, or something that's just very easy and they want to move on to something else? Just giving that one of the handouts that we have at PACER is about accommodations and modifications. I don't think we gave you that, no, we didn't give you that link for this particular webinar, but you can also go to PACER's website and download the handout on accommodations and even just go over it with your child and see if there's anything there that your child might think that might help them learn more efficiently. So those are the different ways of gathering the information, and most of it is data. Some of it is a little bit more subjective, like you know, asking grandma if she can understand your child, kind of looking for those generalized skills. But a lot of these things are very concrete, like the IEP progress reports, the scores on the state and standard tests, and your child's report cards. So we take a look at these things, and if you're seeing poor classroom grades or test scores, the inability to complete daily work, or looking at these progress reports and seeing whether they say adequate progress or not, all of those kinds of things are good data to use. And just ask yourself, is this the progress that you would expect? Now, when I was talking about writing goals earlier, the IEP team is the one that decides, you know, a reasonable amount of progress to make in 1 year. But as parents, we kind of take a look at our children, you know, separate from that, and, you know, are these the kind of things that you would expect from your child? And just ask yourself that. And if the answer is no, then that's an indication that your child is not, at least not making the progress that you might expect. You know, is your child, you can ask yourself and check out too, is your child able to complete homework independently? How much time does your child spend on homework? Is he turning that homework in? All of those kinds of things are good things to take a look at. And as parents, we can also look at, you know, misbehaviors or frustration. You know, is your child having some behavior problems at school or expressing frustration with school? Asking these questions and analyzing the behavior can help you and your child understand that, you know, are the difficulties resulting from academic challenges, or is there something else, some other problems or distractions going on at school that need to be addressed that might be such as bullying or harassment? Because children, I just want to go back to that first slide again, children have a right to make progress on their IEP goals and in the general curriculum. So if something is standing in their way, then this is definitely something that the IEP team needs to take a look at. So if, as a parent, you take a look at the various things, any of the things I've talked about, and kind of make the judgment that you think your child is not making progress, what can you do about it? As IDEA does require that an IEP be written at least annually, but in addition, a revised IEP can be written whenever significant changes in student program or placement are needed. And so reasons for an IEP not waiting a whole year could be insufficient progress on one or more goals, or insufficient progress in the general curriculum. And this is from IDEA. This isn't just something that PACER is saying or something that you would be requesting, but this is right from the regulations, because this isn't in the script, but one of my favorite sayings is the definition of insanity. You don't want to be doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If the data is showing that your child is not making progress on goals or in the general curriculum, then the team needs to meet to decide what might be done differently. So if you do request an IEP meeting, we always encourage that you do it in writing. And once the meeting is scheduled, we really encourage parents to prepare for the meeting. And we also have put a link to a handout on attending meetings to plan your child's IEP to this webinar to give you some other tips. But decide if you want to bring someone with you. You know, if let's say it's that speech goal example that I was using earlier, and you just really think your child's not making progress in clear, articulate speech, and maybe there's somebody from the community or a relative that you would want to bring along that would give their perspective on how your child is speaking. You know, that information can be very helpful as well. We really encourage you to, you know, gather information and review the records. One of the materials that we have available at Pacer Center that's free for parents is a special education record-keeping folder. And we encourage all parents to have some method of keeping records so that they can look at the IEP. They can look at the current evaluation report. They have a place to put the progress reports. Because when we say gather information and review records before an IEP meeting, this is what we're talking about. Take a look at that. Bring it to the IEP meeting so that you're talking about data when you talk to the school about why you think your child may or may not be making progress. And just think about what you know about the child. What have you observed at home? And you might have things to share that you want to think about ahead of time. What do you see that works with your child that the school might be able to benefit from as well? So then at the IEP meeting, you're going to want to discuss the progress that you see that your child has or has not made, because changes might be necessary. And there's all kinds of different ways that changes can be made so that a child could resume making meaningful educational progress. While the school can't guarantee that a child will achieve the goals on the IEP, they must make a good faith effort to assist the child to do so. And as part of that effort, it may call for some changes. So some of the ways, there's 5 bullets on this particular screen of ways, things. There might be a lot more, but maybe a special education or related services time. Maybe it's not enough time, or it could be the setting. Well, that's the location of instruction. Is it the proper setting so that your child is able not to be distracted or have you know, more or less students in a particular group so that progress can be made. Or it could be the method of instruction. If your child isn't making progress using one particular method, is there a different method that could be used? As well as curriculum. If a particular curriculum is, you know, not making the expected progress, discuss with the school if there is another one. Assistive technology can really be a key for helping children learn. Every year at every annual IEP meeting, the school and the IEP team is supposed to discuss, might a child benefit from some assistive technology so that their learning can be efficient. So it's just really important. You might want to ask questions like, you know, are there, this gets to placement a little bit too, you know, could my child be more fully included in a regular education curriculum so that they could make progress? Is there some kind of assistive technology that might help them be more fully included? Might ask, in what environment does my child learn the best? Which subjects are the best? You find out which subjects are the best, might analyze why those are the best, and could something be carried over there from those classes to where your child is having more difficulty. Might be important to re-look at accommodations. Is there something that could be accommodated to even the playing field more so that your child could make progress in a particular environment or a particular class? And again, assistive technology. Is there some kind of, as an accommodation, is there some kind of a assistive technology that could help your child benefit from their regular education or their learning on their IEP goals?
Carolyn, I've gotten several questions on this. What if the parents feel that they're not making adequate progress, but the school says that they are? How do you address that?
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, that leads us right into the next overhead, and we definitely do get those questions as advocates on a regular basis too, because sometimes members of the IEP team don't see things exactly the same. And that's guaranteed to happen with progress as well. School may check the box on a progress report that it's adequate progress, and a parent might not agree with that. So what do you do about it? One of the things that I often tell parents is it's not okay to be stuck. There are lots of ways to resolve issues, resolve disagreements, and come to an understanding. So one of the things that we do at PACER is work with parents through different resolution options. And so you can certainly call us and say such and such is the problem. You know, what method do you think might be the way to resolve this? But there is more information, and there are links on your screen. We do have the first link there, Publications, Dispute Resolution Options. That's a downloadable brochure that gives an outline of all the dispute resolution options in Minnesota. And there's also a webinar, an archived webinar on PACER's website about, it's called Resolving Disagreements Through Special Education. And so you can certainly use those. But just as an overview, we always recommend that if there's a disagreement, and in this case, you know, parents think there's not making progress and school thinks they are, the first thing is probably that IEP team meeting that we talked about earlier, because most issues can be resolved at that stage. And sometimes the resolution might be that we're going to try something for 3 months and see if it works. I found that teams are a lot more flexible when you can honestly say, you know, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but let's try it for 3 months, measure it, and see if doing whatever this is helps my child make more meaningful educational progress. On the last slide, I've just given you a few resources. Of course, here's PACER's phone number and website. There's also a lot of good information from the Minnesota Department of Education, and there's the address for their website, and also the site for the report cards. And even though this says report card 2005, that is the up-to-date, always the up-to-date information about individual schools and school districts, so you can get the information. And one of the groups there are children receiving special education services, children with disabilities. So you can look there and see how your district is doing in that regard. And then the U.S. Department of Education also has a really good website and a lot of good information there. Now it looks like, let me just ask Jill if there's any more questions that have come in. This webinar will be archived, and so we try to include questions that are directly related to this webinar. And so if you have other questions that are not asked, are not answered on this, please feel free to call PACER.
Yeah, we have had several great questions. A few of them I've referred them to call in a PACER and speak with an advocate because it's not necessarily related to this topic. But if there are questions that we have not answered, I suggest you call in and ask to speak with an available advocate, and we can discuss further.
Okay, great. Okay, well, that concludes our webinar for today, and thank you so much for joining us.